Hello everyone, welcome to the Director's Take podcast. Marcus here. Oz is obviously off working on his first episode of TV, which is amazing. Hopefully there'll come a point when we get to speak about that, but at the minute I'm just receiving all the fun little behind the scenes tidbits, which I'm sure we'll share with you at some point as we break down that process with some production diaries. But today we have got someone super special. We have got Nick Rowland with us. So Nick is a director that's on the up and up in a big way. This is his third feature now, She Rides Shotgun, which forms the basis of our chat today. He previously did Calm with Horses with Barry Keoghan, as we'll get into in the intro. You'll hear all about him. But his short films made massive waves on the circuit, BAFTA nominated, got into Sundance. Like all of his short films were like hit after hit. And he got signed super early and has just been sort of in the ascendancy ever since. And from the outside, you'd view it as like, oh, this is a very generic. This is a success story. That he would have had no struggles at all. He's just flown up, and life's been really easy for him. And that's obviously never the case. This is also great for us because we're getting to speak to more and more people who are working at a super high level, and you're getting all of this access for free, and it's kind of very much sort of like targeted deep down into like the itty bitty bits of craft, as well as artistic process and mindset, because I think mindset is massive with directing, which I don't think people really talk about too much. The unique pressures that come with it, the expectation that comes with it, and not just working at the highest level, but also like the expectation we have in ourselves of trying to ascend to working at the highest level. So I hope you all enjoy the chat. It's super insightful. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, let's crack on. Nick Rowland is an award-winning director whose short film work has seen him ascend the film industry at a rapid pace, where he's now seen as one of the brightest up-and-coming directors in Hollywood and the film industry at large. So he announced himself in the short film circuit with Dancing in the Ashes, which was his graduation project from Bournemouth Film School. This went on to be nominated for a Scottish BAFTA and also an RTS award, and he was then chosen to attend the National Film and Television School, where his first-year film, Slap, was nominated for a BAFTA and BIFA, and his second film at the school, Out of Sight, was nominated for the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance, and his grad film, starring Richard Madden, Group B, went on to be nominated for a Student Academy Award, and it also won an RTS award as well. So that all went well. And then from there, he went on to direct episodes of Cuffs, Ripper Street and Hard Sun for BBC One, before his feature film debut, Calm with Horses, was released, starring Cosmo Jarvis and Barry Keoghan, which premiered at TIFF in 2019. And he has since made two more features, the TV movie Floodlights and the soon-to-be-released thriller starring Anna Sophia Higa and also Taron Egerton, called She Rides Shotgun, which is going to form the basis of a lot of our talk today. So super excited to have you with us, and welcome to the podcast, Nick Rowland.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to having a chat.
Awesome. So I think we should just get straight into it with a really, really simple question that we start all our podcasts off with, Nick, which is, what is directing to you?
What is directing? Every director is different, and we don't get to see how other people do it too often. For me, I think directing is about helping other people do their best work in a way that joins into a whole piece. You know, that's something that joins up. But I think a lot of directing is problem solving and helping people do their best work.
So I'd say that I've followed your journey from way back, actually, ever since I learned about film school. When I was at university in like 2012 onwards, and I think from then I think you've done Dancing with the Ashes, and I'd seen that. I actually ended up working on one of the graduation films as a runner at the same time you were studying there. I was with is it Annie? You remember Annie?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I worked on her film, but some of the people on her set were talking about you and your films, like kind of doing well. Like, oh, who's this guy?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what must be over a decade ago, probably.
Which is fucking terrifying. Yeah. Over a decade ago. But in looking at your journey from afar, it's almost seen as like a model for the best case scenario and how things can go. But you started off actually rally driving, with that being a passion. So
yes,
it'd be interesting to know to give us like a bit of an overview about how you fell into filmmaking, and also why you believe that you could be a success at either, because that's also part of the challenge, is how you kind of ascend with self-belief.
Well, that's interesting. I'm not sure I've ever had self-belief, to be honest. I feel like that's something I've lacked my whole life, and I've never had an abundance of it. And you know, a lot of people these days talk about imposter syndrome, and that's definitely something I've sort of battled with. Yeah, so I had this sort of I was focused on rally driving until I was 21, and I was doing the Chinese Rally Championship and the British Rally Championship, and that was sort of my whole focus, and that sort of came to an abrupt end around the financial crisis in 2008. And then I had a year, I moved up to Scotland with my mum, and I worked in the local aquarium, being like a tour guide, teaching kids about local fish from the Moray Firth in Scotland. And it was, you know, I just wasn't really sure. It was a bit of whiplash from what I'd been doing and what I'd been focusing on, and I didn't really have any direction. So I went on the UCAS website, which, you know, this in the UK, it's helps you select a university course, and there was like a multiple choice questionnaire that you could fill out, and it would give you suggestions of courses you might like to do. So I filled out this questionnaire, and number one suggestion was for me to be a librarian, and I thought, I can't do that because I'm heavily dyslexic. And number two was film production, so I thought, oh, that sounds quite fun. And I'd been watching a lot of movies because I'd moved up to Scotland. All of my friends were down in England, so I wasn't having the most active social life at that point in my life. So I was watching a lot of films anyway. One night on Film 4, there was Train Spotting, and then either before or after that was The Diving Bell and Butterfly. And watching those two films back to back, I suddenly had this light bulb moment of not just consuming the story, but being really interested in the way it was told, in very sort of expressionistic ways and subjective ways. So I was sort of interested in, you know, it's like in Train Spotting, I noticed that everything felt quite graphic, and, you know, I would then go on to learn that, oh, that's because a lot of it was shot on a 10mm lens, and The Diving Bell and the Butterfly had this sort of like hand-cranked film style that they were using, you know, so I just kind of got very interested in it. So I applied to film school. I went to Bournemouth first, and I almost quit after the first week. Actually, you have to thank my sister for encouraging me to stay. But in the first week, I think in the very first lecture, the tutor, who I respect and like a lot, but on the first day he said, put your hand up if you want to be a director. And obviously the whole room put their hand up. And he said, well, most of you should put your hands down again, because it's, you know, it's not going to happen. Maybe it will happen to one of you. And I felt really demotivated by that, and a bit foolish, because I'd sort of come down to Bournemouth on a bit of a whim. And I felt, I guess, yeah, and that sort of imposter syndrome never really left. I felt this need to catch up, because a lot of the people there had been interested in film their whole life up to that point. A lot of people were from London or had more access to art house cinemas and had more access to like world cinema. And I, you know, there wasn't even a cinema in my town. So I grew up on a diet of American blockbusters and things like that. And I felt intellectually intimidated. And I had this idea that a director is meant to be the loudest person in the room, and kind of wakes up thinking, well, the world needs to know what I think about this. This is my point of view on that. And I've never felt particularly like I have enough I don't have, you know, who am I to sort of preach anything or sort of, so yeah, so I almost quit. But then my sister convinced me to stay, and I very quickly I just really fell in love with making films, even though I didn't know much about them. I didn't know who Fellini was, or I was really starting from zero. But I just kind of loved telling stories, and I loved working with actors, even though at that point you're working with your fellow film students or just like local people in the town or whatever. But, even though I didn't know a lot about films, I felt like I've always been quite a sensitive person, and I've always been able to kind of emotionally tune into people. And I guess I would sort of did that with the people that were in my films. And I was from a very early point, I felt like I was able to emotionally communicate a feeling, what something feels like, I guess. So that's really the thing that I've always focused on. I was never too interested in the technical side of things. I've obviously, you learn that because you have to, but I was never one of these people that was super excited at the thought of using an ARRI camera for the first time, or using a dolly, or that stuff. The kind of technical stuff is a means to an end, so I guess because of that, a lot of my early work, and probably my work still now, the camera work isn't like, there's nothing super, by the way, not that the cinematography is bad, the cinematography is great, but I prefer to keep things simple, usually because I've never had the luxury of having a lot of time. So you can either spend a lot of time rehearsing a complicated move, but then you've only got a couple of takes, or you can keep things simpler, and it allows you to sort of layer the performances more. Yeah, I've never felt like I could make a success of anything. I promised myself when I started film school that I would only do it if I enjoyed it, and if I was good at it, I guess. If I felt like I was swimming against the tide, or if I felt like I was good at it but I was finding it too stressful, then I would move on and do something else. Because I think with my racing career, I had decided that I wanted to have this life as a racing driver. I just was never really designed for that. But I as a young man, I decided that's what I wanted to do, and I was so committed to it. I never really took a step back and thought, should I be doing this? Am I actually happy doing this? And actually, with space, I realized I was pretty stressed and fearful a lot of the time, but I was just so fixated on this dream that I had. So I think I took that, and I took that learning, and I really thought, well, I'll only pursue this if it's fun. And I saw a lot of people around me doing it, and who I recognized myself when I was racing. It's like it's what they wanted to do, but I could see that they weren't really enjoying it. It was very painful.
It's really interesting to hear you speak about that, Nick, about saying that you didn't have self-belief. And I think, any filmmaker on the come up, especially since like say 2015 onwards, they would have studied your work, because I'm not just saying it to gas you, but your run of short films that you had on the come up were very striking, all three of them. And to hear you say that you didn't have self-belief, I think I've actually heard you say it before in another interview, and talking about that and the imposter syndrome thing. So it's really interesting to hear you say that, because it links to the next question, which is, from the outside, people will see that you've risen up through the industry with no hitches, but this is a notoriously difficult industry to navigate, especially in the early years. So what were the biggest challenges you faced transitioning from shorts to long form, in getting work done, but also yourself, in terms of you pushing through that, wanting that self-belief and that resilience?
Truthfully, I think the hardest thing for me has been, I won't go into details, but around the time that I moved to Scotland, like the sort of financial stability of my family went out the window. It was not a stable situation. So when I decided to go to film school, I knew that I was never going to have any financial support system, just because of the circumstances that I was in. So other than the money that I was, the time I worked in the aquarium doing my tour guiding, I just sort of saved as much as I could. And so I kind of had to self-fund myself through film school. And then the pressure, I was in so much debt by the end of the National Film School, where I did my MA. If I didn't get directing work straight away, I just don't know what I would have done. So I've always had to work, and sometimes that means you do work that you don't necessarily, you wouldn't choose to do if you had the luxury of being able to wait for the perfect thing. I've kind of always had to work, but I think there are blessings in it as well, because I worked so hard because I couldn't, not succeeding felt too dangerous and was too scary. Also, you work because you have to, and then you gain experience, and you meet people, and you find opportunities in places that you wouldn't have looked otherwise. And I've been lucky. I started directing TV off the back of those short films that I did, and I've tried to make choices. I've tried to balance the fact that I've needed to support myself through my early career, but I've also not wanted to get, I've wanted to make long-term choices. There is a path where you can go, and I could have taken on more consistent TV work, and I could have had a more lucrative start. I could have made choices more in the short term, but then my fear was, will that limit my opportunities in the future? And
no, it's helpful, because I mean, that's one of the things I want to talk about. A couple of questions down the line is about the expectation around first features, and then how it sort of like turned out in practice. But just for like the listeners who are sort of, because a lot of our listeners are in short film land, or at the point where they're struggling to get that first break in TV. I just want to know what your first experiences were like in TV, actually. And because you hear a lot about people not taking chances on people who have directed shorts, and yeah. So I want to know like what you kind of learned from that experience of directing TV for the first time. Was there anything that took you by surprise with that transition?
I was really lucky so I did this TV show called Cuffs, which was like a BBC One. I think it was like 8 o'clock prime time-y sort of cop show, and it was Tiger Aspect, and it was really all down to the executive producer Will Gould, who had seen my shorts, and they needed a director. And I think the episode I was doing, it was a lot of it took place like inside a police patrol car, and my graduation film was a lot about two people just sort of sat in a car. So I think Will took a chance on me, and I'll always be grateful for that. So I think with TV, getting the first credit is the hardest thing, and I think once you can prove that you're up to it, then then other things can follow. That show in particular, it was a really good first job because everyone on it was so supportive, and I know everyone always talks about like film sets feeling like a family atmosphere. To my experience, that's it's actually more rare, I think, for it to actually feel really really like that. Obviously, like a healthy amount of people like tease you and mess around with you because they know you're fresh out of film school, but I felt very taken care of, and I felt like I was sort of also left alone to be quite experimental and try things, and it felt kind of it felt weirdly, it was high stakes, but also kind of it didn't feel high stakes. It felt a bit like a playground or an extension of film school. And from then on, then Will brought me on to a slightly more high profile show that he did called Ripper Street, which was like a more high budget period piece set in London in the Victorian era. And again, it's just, you're just kind of getting, I got to work with, like Matthew McFadden and like, proper actors and proper sets and proper scale to things. And it's just sort of, I feel really grateful to Will, and all for those early jobs, because I didn't have loads of confidence, he really, his belief in me sort of, made the whole thing more manageable. And I think it really helped, going into to do my first film. Actually, in many ways, the scale went back down again from some of the TV I'd been doing. So it's sort of, the pressure and anxieties are around different things, but in terms of just the scale of production, it was actually that wasn't intimidating at all. What was intimidating was actually just like the lack of money, and like how do we match our ambition with the resources we have. But then again, there with, you know, I was very lucky that I did the debut with Film 4, and you know, Evie Yates and Sam Lavender was really supportive during the script process, and then through production. It felt a bit like an extension of film school, where, you know, people are really looking out for you and helping you and backing you. And I think the reason, you know, Calm with Horses in a personal way was really tough for me, just because I had no money, and I didn't deal with the pressure very well. I feel like I didn't always represent myself in the best way when I was stressed and things like this. But the reason it went on a year longer than expected is because Film 4 wanted the film to be the best that it could be, and backed us to take more time to sort of figure it out, because it wasn't an easy edit, and it really only sort of came together at the final hour in a lot of ways. So I'm not complaining that we had that extra time. Actually, it was a blessing and a luxury, and I'm very grateful that we had partners that would let us finish the film when it was its best version.
So there was quite a lot of industry hype around your first feature project, Calm with Horses, and both the actors that you worked with it, Cosmo and Barry, you know, have gone on to make respective waves in the industry themselves. On reflecting on it now, what were the big learning experiences you had that have helped you going forward, and is there anything you wish you would have done differently?
Things I would have done differently. Oh, so many things I would have done differently. I think I'm really happy with the film. I'm really grateful for the way it was received, and for everything. You know, it sort of did everything I needed it to do in terms of that. For what you need a debut to do, it sort of did all of those things. But I look at that film as it's just full of growing pains and mistakes, and there was who I was before I made that film, and then who I was after that. And I feel like I learned so many tough lessons that have really helped me on everything else I've done since then. I feel like there's sort of like simple things, like tonally. I think what I struggled with was the film, and by saying the film, I'm really talking about me. I didn't know what the film tonally should be, and I think I was guilty of, okay, I'm going to do what I feel like you put this pressure on your first film, and it's like I tried to make every single film I've ever loved. So I sort of tonally was mixing all these different things, and it was confused, honestly. And I learned a lot just about kind of what you structurally, what you need a protagonist to do. I know it sounds so basic, but the idea of making sure your protagonist is active. I thought I understood that, and I thought that's what we had in the script, and it's only through making that film and sort of really understanding. You learn very quickly on set when a scene isn't working or doesn't have the right ingredients to allow the audience to like automatically connect with your protagonist. And luckily we had Cosmo, who, sort of goes without saying what a great job he did with that character and in the film. But it was the protagonist of that film is a tricky protagonist, because he's, by nature, he is the sidekick. He's the guy in the background normally. Like if in another crime movie, he'd be the extra in the background with his arms folded, protecting the main characters.
Yeah,
exactly.
The henchman.
And the kind of the lack of agency, really, it made the edit a tricky one to navigate. But luckily, Cosmo had given so many gifts and made the character so active just through very subtle performance choices and things like that we could make it work. That in the early days, Barry's character has all the dialogue, and Barry's character Dimpner is driving the story forward in a lot of ways, especially in the first act. If you weren't careful, you'd you would sort of naturally, your attention wants to go to him. And actually we had to be very strict in the edit to be like, no, this is where the story's happening. The guy that's not saying anything, the guy that's in the background, actually this is the story we're telling. Tonally being spread too thin, but then also I was over ambitious in a lot of ways, and I would, rather than do one thing well, I tried to do three things, like shooting from the hip and with not enough time and money. And then you get to the edit and realize, well, none of it's good enough now, so you have to sort of cut around it all, and just kind of learning a lot about leadership as well, and learning a lot about myself and how I was dealing with pressure of the situation. I do think directing gets easier the more you do it, not just because you gain experience, but people start to trust you more naturally. And what's really difficult about going from shorts to either your first piece of TV or your first film is some of it's probably projection, your own fear you're projecting onto others, but part of it is true, is that you've kind of been given the keys, but no one knows if you can actually drive the car still. And you can tell that, there's still a question mark. And going back to my imposter syndrome, I didn't really believe in myself. So I would think about what's the theoretical best of everything. How do I surround myself with that? And then it doesn't matter if I'm not very good, because it's all these other things are propping me up. And actually, I think I learned on Calm with Horses that I needed to focus more on what was going to get the best out of me. That is the main lesson that I've taken forward and, applied to everything else I've done. And actually, and with a pandemic for a couple of years after that film, you have a lot of time to think and reflect. And I made a note, at the end of every day, I would make notes on set of things that had gone wrong, or things that, things that I needed to reflect on, just so you have them in your memory. And I kind of got to the end of the film and thought, I'm not sure I can do this over and over again, like sustainably, in a way that will make me also a happy person. And honestly, like in that pandemic year, I was like, am I even cut out for this? I'm not sure I am. But actually, probably the best thing I did from Calm with Horses is take the time to identify the things that I was fine. Obviously filmmaking is always going to be stressful, but what are the things that I can change that would make it easier for me and would make it a more sustainable career for me, where I can really enjoy the process.
No, that's cool. Because I want to dig into that at the end of our chat, is how you fill your cup outside of filmmaking, because I think that's increasingly important. But it's interesting you touched on the pandemic, because as you said earlier, there was the film released, I think it was on March 13th in the UK, and then immediately hit with the lockdown. And so I imagine anyway, because I'm working towards my first feature now, and I imagine like for you at that point, you were putting this pressure on of like, this needs to be the debut, or you can kind of almost tie into that narrative, or just dealing with any expectation externally or internally is just quite difficult. And so I wanted to know how the pandemic had you reflecting on the pressures, expectations of that job, of that specific film, and how it sort of shaped you going forward.
I think, it was a weird time, wasn't it? And
fucking weird.
I almost wasn't, I wasn't too aware of because it was literally as we were promoting I was so fixated on the film. I was probably the least, out of everyone, I was paying attention to what was happening with the end of the world as much as everyone else. So probably through denial. And I think like the British film industry is amazing, because it does the structure where there are these funds and there are these organizations that are committed to doing debut movies, helping people onto the ladder, is incredible. I wasn't very good at managing again, it comes back to the pressure that you put on yourself, but it does start to feel a bit like X Factor, because every year there's a couple of debuts from Film 4, a couple from BBC, a couple from BFI. And it's like, it feels like it's really hard to not compare yourself and try and quantify, am I a failure or not, just by looking for these markers and things. And what was actually like a really good lesson for me is I was sort of, the film got 4 BAFTA nominations, which was amazing. And that's some, and obviously at film school and stuff, you like imagine, getting to have your moment to sort of be on the red carpet and stuff like that. And there was something quite like beautiful that, or like a lesson that, that, okay, well, we got that moment. But my experience of the BAFTAs was being in a Zoom waiting room. They told us we had to wear a tux. So I was like in Dalston in my studio flat where I've got like mice running around, but I've had to put a tux on, and I'm on like a Zoom waiting room. And they basically, and you don't even get to talk to anyone. It's like if you're in the waiting room and then you get brought into the feed, it means you've won. If the waiting room closes, it means you didn't win. So you're just sat there, and then the waiting room just ends, and then you're just sat there in a tux, being like, okay, well that was the BAFTAs for me. And it was like kind of a bit of a bummer. It felt like a really good lesson in like how none of that stuff really is what you should be focusing on or caring about. And it's something I've tried to carry forward, is really to enjoy the process of working on stories you care about, working with people that you enjoy working with. And it comes back to, when you ask me what is directing, I think it's now I look at it, I think I used to think of it more about me expressing myself, and now I really do. The way I've found a way of like finding a consistent way of enjoying it is it says so much about the people you're working with, and it's about, I get so much pleasure from seeing their best work and helping them like unlock something, or helping them sort of do work that they're really proud of and that we collectively share together. That has now become the fuel for me. It's like Calm with Horses in it did well and is well regarded, but when I look at that film, I'm not happy with the job that I did. I feel like I made a lot of mistakes. But there's other film, like I did this film Floodlights that no one saw and sort of came and went and disappeared. But I'm really proud of, I'm really happy with the work I did on that. And I know that I did what I set out to do in a lot of ways. And everything you do, even work that's good, you're never always going to make the right choices, but it's about hopefully making more right choices than wrong choices.
You do often get lost in the goals or the ambitions of being in a place. And even for a lot of people, when they get it, they're like, oh, this is all it was. I've actually been to the Royal Festival Hall before. Or do you know what I mean? It's kind of...
One of my student films got a BAFTA nomination, and I was actually, I was just very stressed the whole evening, and I was terrified of, what if I had to like go and say, it's just, actually I was sort of what, why am I, obviously it would be lovely, it'd be lovely to be recognized in that way. It's obviously amazing, but like, I think I've learned it's really healthy not to pay, that shouldn't be the thing that's driving you.
Jumping ahead to She Rides Shotgun, like a good sized budget American thriller set in New Mexico. So I want to know how you came to be involved in the project, and why did you choose this to be your next film? And also because it's filmed and set in the US. So yeah, why was that a choice that you made?
One of the producers, Brad Weston, who's based in LA, I'd had a general meeting with him over Zoom during the pandemic, because he'd seen my first film. As as a young filmmaker, you have lots of general meetings, you have lots of Zooms, and a lot of the time they don't really, no matter how good the Zoom is, they don't necessarily lead to opportunities. But we met on Zoom, and then it was maybe 2 years later that the script was sent over. I guess it was again a moment where I've been very lucky, because I think just the tone is based on an American book. It's set in LA, but like tonally, there was connective tissue with Calm with Horses. It was a crime story, but there was real heart to it. And it wasn't a father-son thing. It was a father-daughter thing. I read the script and I just thought, I know how to make this. And I don't often you're trying to find an angle where I just read it and I was like, oh yeah, I know. I just felt like I knew, at least in my head, I felt like I sort of felt like I could tell the story really. And I was moved by the characters, and I felt I just felt grateful because I'd done Calm with Horses, and we shot it in 2017. It came out went to TIFF at 2019 and then out 2020. And I'd done Floodlights a year later, but then I felt like my career was stagnating. Sort of TV work had dried up a little bit, and I was developing things, but I was just really struggling to get traction. And I feel like She Ride Shotgun came along as a bit of a lifeline and a bit of a blessing, really. And they, originally they said, look, you shoot it in LA for 3 months, and then you can edit it in the UK. But I just had this. I felt like I was stuck in a lot of ways in my life, and I felt like kind of having a restart would help. So I decided to do the edit in LA and fully move over to LA to do the film, and we ended up doing it in New Mexico. And it was just probably the most fun I've ever had making a film. It was just a dream come true, really. It was difficult. It was, it's a step up for me budget wise. It was much more money than I've ever had before. When I would listen to other directors say, "Oh, it's never enough money," I would always roll my eyes when someone who's had 100 million to make a movie is like, "Oh, it was actually really difficult. We didn't have enough money." But it was certainly gave an opportunity for us to sort of have a bit more scale and have a bit more kind of stylistic flourishes compared to other stuff I've done. There's in Calm with Horses, we had 1 day to do a car chase, so that really limits you to a very simplistic way of doing it. Whereas, on She Rides, we had 2.5 days or 2.5 nights, which doesn't feel like a lot more, but it's it does allow you to do a little bit more. That was it, really. It felt like an opportunity to almost do a debut again, because like I say, because my first film did slightly, it's found nowadays people have seen it, but for a while it was sort of this hidden movie. Certainly, it had a theatrical release in the US, but again, no theaters were open at the time. So doing this film feels like another opportunity to sort of do what I tried to do the first time, but this time without a pandemic.
And was there an interview process for it? Because you were saying that the producer reached out to you off the back of a general. I'd be intrigued to sort of hear about what your process is with interviews.
So read the script. I think I maybe pitched on it 3 times. I think the first time was more of a conversation about the script, and then I prepared quite an extensive sort of like mood board / presentation. I think for me, I always do better when I'm having a conversation about the script. When I've done my worst pitches is when I've tried to formally stick to a formal presentation. I just get sort of stage fright, and I kind of, I would never be a very good actor. But so yeah, I try to. Usually, the first meeting is really just talking about the script and talking about what works, what doesn't work. I guess your point of view on it, and then normally, that is following up with more of a here's your vision for it, here's the references, here's how I would do it. So yeah, I think I've sort of pitched a couple of times to a few different producing partners, and then fifth season with the financiers, so I'd sort of pitched to them as well. But yeah, I felt grateful to be attached to it, but then it's like, okay, now you're attached, but is the thing ever going to get made? Lots of people attached to scripts, and then I met Taron Egerton, and we got on really well, and he wanted to do it, and fifth season said, well, look, if he does it, then we'll fully finance it. And within the space of a few weeks, we had a movie that was ready to go, and it felt a little almost too good to be true, really, because Calm with Horses, I think it took us 5 years to get the finances together for $2 million. for £2 million. And then all of a sudden, in the space of 3 months, I had a film in America ready to go. And then the writer's strike kicked in and the actor's strike. So then obviously everything slowed down again. Well, no, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I'm still here. So that, had that not happened, it would have been, incredibly fast. And I don't expect it to ever come together that quickly ever again. But the script was sort of, there were things I wanted to change about it. But 80% of it I loved. There was just a few, just ironing out some of the emotional arc of Polly, the main character, and kind of, I guess, trying to work out what I wanted to say with the film, like how I wanted to leave the audience, or trying to understand, what the film was about for me. Took a little bit of wrangling.
A question: Did you communicate the changes you wanted to make in the interviews, or did you wait until your foot was in the door and then?
I didn't have the solutions, but I think
in the pitches, sorry.
Yeah, I didn't have like, this is how the movie's going to end, but I think I identified some things that I wanted to iron out. I guess there's nothing worse than if you're not making the same. If people think you're making a different film than the one you're making, it's better to not make the film than to be sort of tricking people into and I think partly that's something I learned on Calm with Horses, is I never really wanted to make a violent gangster movie. I wanted to make a sort of more of a family drama, and I sort of tried to smuggle a family drama into a crime thriller. At times I lost my way on Calm with Horses because I was focused so much on trying to please other people rather than, why am I telling this story? So I think now I try to start very much there, and then if people are excited by that, then you go on that journey, and if not, then you don't, and it wasn't the right project. So yeah, I think I was pretty honest about what's that.
That's really helpful, thank you. And so yeah, I think it's good to say just that the film has got excellent lead performances, and it really lives and dies by those. So I think to start with Taron Egerton's role in it, you kind of touched on how and why he was brought on board. But I'd really like to ask about how you went into character together, because when I was watching it, there was a moment for me where his character suggests that he doesn't deserve love or to be loved. And that felt really poignant to me. I think it's in a diner sequence. And you and Taron have both talked about like shining a lens on and challenging what masculinity is, which is actually a through line, I guess, from even your early short film Slap. So I'd be intrigued to know your philosophy around like building characters with your cast and that actor-director collaboration.
I've always been interested in male vulnerability, I guess. I guess maybe it was growing up in the kind of motorsport environment, and I'd never really felt like the other men around me. I've always kind of been fascinated by masculinity, because I guess I don't feel like a super masculine man. And I've always been interested in male characters that are trying to exist in a very male, where they feel like there's a lot of rules to masculinity, or things like that. I wanted to cast Nate. He's a father trying to protect his daughter, and I thought there's a version of this where you cast an actor in their 40s or 50s, and I wasn't really interested in that version of father, the kind of classical father, being the man and protecting the family that he loves, and that I was more interested in a young guy who doesn't even know what being a father actually means, and someone who is trying to learn, who's trying to kind of like go on that journey in the most extreme circumstances, I guess, and that sort of, I guess, the vulnerability of that, and that felt like something slightly more fresh and something probably was more suitable for me to tell, because I'm not a father, and I don't know. I felt like this version is the story that I felt like I could have something to say with, And I think also what excited Taron about doing this project is, he hasn't done a lot of indie films. A lot of the stuff he's done has been, big canvas, kind of big spectacle movies, like Kingsman and Rocket Man, and sort of doing something small and sort of dirt under the fingernails and kind of a style to the performances that were sort of loose and unpredictable. I was really excited about doing that with Taron, and also the challenge of, obviously Anna, she was 9 when we cast her. I think she turned 10 on set. I think she's just recently turned 12 now, but it's having a lot of the way we constructed the movie was about making sure it was sort of all about Anna and her performance and getting the best out of her. And likewise, Taron had to... the film only works because of their chemistry and because of how they work together. So really, they had to always be focused on the other. And that's what obviously a lot of great performance is about. The more you focus on the other character in the scene is when the really interesting things happen. And I think this was just a real joy to work with both of them.
Yeah, on that, you've kind of touched on it now, about the dynamic between Anna and Taron. So we kind of love to know just like how you kind of went about deepening that and how you crafted that. And I think Marcus, you were saying it was without rehearsal as well, and how you practically on set worked with her.
It was no real rehearsal. We shot the film in 25 days, and because she was 10 years old, I don't remember exactly what the hours are, but I think you certainly can't do a full day of filming with someone that young. It's like 8 or 9 hours or something. I think the challenge was to still create an atmosphere where it was about experimentation and play, and it's quite an intense film. And I think for any actor, but also especially for Anna, it was just really important that it never felt like a pressurized environment where you either do a good or a bad job. I think that was really important, that it never felt like there was a right way of doing something or a wrong way of doing something, or I didn't want there to be any stakes for failure. The phrase I used a lot was confident curiosity. That's sort of what I encouraged everyone to focus on, so that there wasn't... And I find it a bit boring when you go into a scene fixated on the way the scene should be. I think of course have that as a starting point, and everyone brings their best ideas to the table, but I prefer approaching a scene that's confident, i.e. we know what the scene needs to be, we know what we need to we know the story we're telling, but have the confidence to be surprised and to find things and be curious about, let's do the scene the wrong way, let's turn it on its head, and that requires trust, because there's a danger that if you try something, you may fall flat on your face, and the cast need to trust that you're never going to make them look stupid. If I gave Anna a dart and asked her to throw the dart at a dartboard, and she would hit double 20, just because that's what she did. If I went, wow, that's amazing, now I need you to do that again, then suddenly that's a lot of pressure to put on. If someone did that to me, something I just did naturally, suddenly, if I was asked to do it again, would be a real challenge. And actually, I think with Anna, it was about always never telling her where the dart to go. Just keep throwing the dart, and we're going to be there to respond to it and to capture it. And it doesn't matter where it lands; it really doesn't. And if it doesn't even hit the dartboard, and as long as it doesn't go in anyone's eye, then it's all good. I think also with young, because I've done 3 things now with young actors, and I do find it's helpful to be more involved in terms of during a take. sometimes as a director, I find it's helpful to sort of feed, almost like your Jiminy Cricket on their shoulder, kind of feed the internal thoughts to help them find the texture of the scene. So it's like if Taran says to her, get in the car, maybe Anna's instant feeling is to get in the car, but I found it perfectly fine to say don't trust him, or just feed a thought that and as long as you've got an actor who knows what they're doing, they can take that and they can use that. And I that's quite, there's a sort of a hands-on element to working with kids, which is sort of which I find really rewarding. It's never been an intentional thing to do a lot of films that require good child performances, but it's something that has sort of happened and I've actually really enjoyed.
What you spoke about just then is something specifically you helped me with in rehearsal on Space Plug, which I've spoke about on the podcast before, was because I, obviously being taught how we've been taught, it's never usually a thing where you think to shower an actor during a take.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's
well, not to shower them, but to kind of guide them through what they should be doing exactly is what you're told exactly not what not to do. And so like when we had you in rehearsal, you kind of like freed that up, and then also to see the result from the kid of like them actually finding. It was more about them finding the right pace of what they were doing, because otherwise they think they need to rush through it to get like the gold star at the end of it.
Yeah.
So it's really, really helpful. And so, yeah, I'd be intrigued to know, like, with the film, like, I was really taken by the ending in particular, which it is like an extended take on the lead character, on Anna. Was that scripted, or was that found through play? And I guess to follow on from that, were there any elements which you're sort of like happy with, which you found on the day with either of the actors?
So the ending was scripted. It was like, I didn't know how to end the film for a lot. I think I was sort of I think we were even in prep, and maybe it's, I sort of wrote the end scene while I was in New Mexico maybe. So it was scripted, but in terms of, it's not, what Anna does is really incredible. It's interesting because it's such a powerful performance. Once I moved on from that shot, because it is just one shot, she felt like she'd left emotion on the table. She was like, and it's not actually, it's exactly why it's so moving, is because you can feel she's obviously, there's all this stuff happening behind those eyes, but she sort of keeps it together. I think that's all, honestly, you try and create an environment that feels safe. I can't take any credit for what Anna does there. That's just Anna being brilliant. The interesting thing with Anna is, there's a lot of like emotional scenes in the film, and sometimes Anna would feel like if she hadn't gone to 11, then it's like she'd left something behind. And actually often it was not about helping her get somewhere, it was often about encouraging her that she didn't always need to be at maximum, and actually there was a point, we'd done a few like emotional scenes in a row for whatever reason, the way the schedule sort of came together, and we got to in the middle of the movie there's a convenience store action scene. In the script it was a lot more serious, but we started setting up the first shot of this of what was going to be like a 3-day sequence we were filming. Taran, Anna and I, we were just so emotionally exhausted from doing a lot of like heavy emotional scenes. We were like, we just want to have some fun today. So we kind of created, I don't want to spoil it, but he's sort of going into a convenience store to try and get a bit of money and be a criminal. But he sort of has this dad moment where he's like, do you want some candy while I'm in there? I'll go get you a candy. And we were just, that wasn't in the script, but I was reminiscing like when my dad would go to a petrol station, he'd always do this dad joke where he'd be like, what do you want? I'd be like, oh, I'll have a Mars bar. He's like, okay, I'll get you one Kit Kat, as if he'd misheard me. I'd be like, no, I wanted it. So we sort of laughed about that, and then just decided to sort of put that as a beat in the story just to have a bit of fun with it. And then obviously the props team were frustrated because I was like, okay, we need to get like a bunch of Snickers bars and then a bunch of, nothing that was planned. But, and we just sort of, then suddenly like that whole scene became about Taran's character kind of wanting to show off to his daughter, and sort of, it's almost like take your, when you take your kid to work day, or take your, there's to try and turn it into like actually a moment where, in a very like odd scenario, it is a dad being a dad, and that's wasn't really in any of the planning, but just came from that day when we arrived to do that scene. We were just so tired of the heaviness, so we thought we just don't want to do heavy today. And actually, I think and the story, it works in the film because of that feeling we were having on set, of noticing how we were feeling at that point in the shoot. Sort of we pivoted to kind of get a bit of levity, and coming back to the confident curiosity, it's like, I think if you get too fixed on one way a scene needs to be, I think you can miss, the film is a moving, it's a collection of people, and it's a collection of people's talents and moods. And as someone who's never, as I said, at the very start of this journey, I never wake up being like, oh, the world needs to see my version of this or that. What I love about directing is it is just about a group of people making something together. And actually, it's not really about me at all. It's about the story, and it's about the group of people that I'm with.
So just want to talk to you a little bit about tone, because there's quite a lot of light and shade in the film. So how did you go about crafting the tone for this film, from its opening sequence, and how did you kind of like keep focused on that perspective?
I think this is probably where the kind of NFTS training comes in. Ian Seller, Brian Gilbert training of everything kind of starts with point of view, and are we with a character, or are we observing a character? Are we in their shoes? Are we experiencing the story through their eyes, or are we ahead of them, or all these things? So I think the first thing was, what was exciting about She Ride Shotgun is it's sort of quite a classical story, sort of modern crime western, but the perspective of a 9-year-old girl, her experiencing the story through her lens felt like what makes it interesting. And so I started thinking a lot about, well, what would an adult Polly remember from this period in time, and maybe when I look back on when I was Polly's age, my grandma passed away, and she was in Scotland and we were in England, and we had to drive up through the night to see her and say goodbye to her, and which we did. But I don't actually remember seeing my grandma that night. I remember driving up through the night. I remember the fact that the Bee Gees was the only CD we had in the car, and I remember the fact that I had Chinese takeaway in the hospital because it was the only thing that was open. Like, I remember that meal with perfect clarity, but I don't ever remember seeing my grandmother. And in the film, there's a scene where there's quite a sort of intense situation going on, but Polly's kind of, her attention is on this fish tank because there's some hermit crabs in there, because I guess she's never seen them before, and she's sort of fascinated at looking at these crabs. And that sort of reminded me of my memories that evening when we went to see my grandmother. And so I started thinking, well, what are the things that Polly would focus on? And they might not be the things you'd expect, or they might not be the things that are obvious. So then it was about sort of thinking about memory and thinking about finding a palette that was sort of naturalistic, but had a slight, I kind of hate, that's the sort of like adult fairy tale. I sort of hate that phrase, but I guess I didn't want it to feel like social realism. I wanted it to feel a bit like we're in a story, I guess. So like having vibrancy to it, and having sort of slightly expressionistic elements to it, even if the overall tone was trying to sort of feel quite natural. And it's like in the book, she wants to dye her hair bubblegum pink, when they're on the run, which is like really cool and sort of pulpy, and I love that. In the script, her hair is dyed brown, because obviously like it just doesn't really make sense if you're trying to hide. You're not gonna dye the kid's hair bright color. But I slightly was sad about that, because I loved that there was a pulpiness to the book. In the end, I started looking at photos of kids, or people have tried to dye their hair blonde with bleach and it's gone horribly wrong, and it's kind of gone orangey and
Gingery.
patchy and gingery. I was like, oh, maybe like that can still feel naturalistic, and it can still feel realistic, that some because he doesn't know how to dye hair, he sort of does a botched job, but it will still give Polly a kind of memorable look. And then it's like, okay, but you don't want it to look too much like Fifth Element or whatever. Like, there's trying to like make choices that felt quite visual, I guess, was something I was keen to sort of retain. And then obviously, like, the fact that we shot the film in New Mexico, it was more just about kind of being excited. It's just such a beautiful cinematic place. It was just an embarrassment of riches of cool locations, and just really, I don't know, there's something about America and the Americana of New Mexico. It was just like so as a Brit going over there to make a film, it was just so exciting to shoot in motels. And one of the motels was the same location where they shot Hell or High Water, and I didn't even realize, and then I was there and I was like, I recognize this place. Then I went after our recce, or it's like, yeah, it was, this was used in that film, and that was obviously, you don't want to like cannibalize things, but you can't help but sort of see the echoes of all these other movies you've loved, and like No Country for Old Men, and all great stuff. So it just felt like a privilege to be able to sort of be playing in that same landscape.
So I think we should talk about action and violence, which she did a good job at in the film, because there's quite a bit of it. It's very exciting, especially the car chase. I thought was awesome, and it shows that you had the extra time compared to Calm with Horses, because I remember seeing some reviews and people thought the car chase was actually quite exhilarating in Calm with Horses, regardless of how much time you had for it. But you can tell that because you had the extra time, you got to do even more with that, which I find really interesting. But yeah, I thought the bathroom fight in particular was super successful, and you're always constantly trying to do like developing shots within them, sort of like handovers of action beats within them. And I found that quite cool. So I'd be intrigued to know what your process was with action in terms of planning and executing them, because it's not something you can necessarily improvise or find on the day in most circumstances.
No, and especially when you've got 25 days, it's not, you need to sort of hit the ground running. I think the main thing with all of the action was we wanted it to just tonally, again, it comes back to tone. We wanted it to still feel like we were playing in a world of naturalism, and I guess making it feel organic and messy and reactive. The concern is with any stunt scene that you're all other times you're focused on telling the story, and the moment you're doing a stunt, it's like everyone gets so excited about the stunt, you kind of forget the story that you're telling underneath the stunt, So making sure that it didn't feel like we're telling an intimate drama and then suddenly we're jumping into some sort of Hollywood language, And Robert Alonso, who was the stunt coordinator and second unit director, we worked really closely and we prevised everything, and like such a privilege getting to work with him. He designed he did the last Batman movie with Robert Pattinson. He sort of designed all of those stunts, and the Batmobile chase with the Penguin was all his work. So he has this wealth of doing these huge like big budget movies. He's done a lot of the Tom Cruise movies and things like that. I was like, why are you doing this small movie with us? And he's like, oh, because it's about, obviously that stuff's great, but there's something really fun and challenging about doing something which is really, all of the action is still about character, and it's about, just telling an emotional story. So, the car chase we do at the middle of the film has, it has a bit of style, but it's still, it still feels intimate, I guess, even though it does have a bit more scale than other things I've done in the past. But yeah, it was all, we storyboarded it all. It was all pre-vised, pre-rehearsed. The whole car chase was we'd done a version of it on a racetrack with cones and everything, because it's sort of a ballet. You have the hero cars and, the cop cars chasing, but then you have all the other cars on the road, which are all stunt drivers as well. So you've got 12 cars all trying to sort of sync up and get really, really tight. So on the day when you're filming it, it's all just running like clockwork, and there's no something like that. You're not finding it on the day. It's all heavily rehearsed. And that's how you're able to do it in just a couple of days.
Great stuff. I want to just go back and just ask you a little bit more about your approach to tone, Nick. Even in that, the way you were talking about, the way the car chases and just kind of the style of it. And you said that you felt that your tonal approach to Calm with Horses wasn't as precise, looking back at it, as you would have liked, perhaps. So what is your sort of approach to tone, and what do you actually think tone is?
I think it's just important to never take your audience for granted, and you can't assume anything. I get really irritated if I'm reading a script and it says something like, so and so walks down the corridor and it's extremely tense. It's well, why is it? You can't just assume that why is that going to be tense? And it comes down to, and that, so that comes down to tone. And I think, speaking about Calm with Horses, I think sometimes it was being light, and sort of there was an eccentricity to it, which was great. But at the same time, I needed to understand, if I need audiences to feel the stakes of a situation, I can't assume they will understand the stakes. So if I put, with She Rides Shotgun, I feel like I had a better handle on when I wanted the audience to take a breath, when I wanted them to hold their breath. I think tone allows you to sort of modulate the emotional journey you're going on. And, I love the Safdie brothers because it's just tense the whole time. And it's you get to the end and you're like, you've been holding your breath for so long. And then it's well, I can't watch that for a few years because it's it was too much or whatever. And I think it comes down to point of view, and I think it comes down to what does the audience need to pay attention to. Tone and perspective, I think, speaks to that as well. And then I think tone, when I'm talking about tone, I'm often talking about performances as well. I think, tone, I think the performances probably more than anything set the tone of what you're watching. And it's funny, I rewatched The Departed recently, and I forgot how funny it is, and how I think of it as it's quite intense. It's thrilling and it's dark, but and dangerous. But the actors are so committed and so in tune with each other that even though it's sort of all quite heightened, it feels so consistent that it's you acclimatize to the tone, and it actually, even though it's sort of laugh out loud funny at moments and big, it works so well. And I think probably when I haven't really mastered that yet, where you can marry those two things. I've just directed an episode of The Gentleman. It's been interesting, obviously, being in the world of Guy Ritchie, because that's something he does as well. It's sort of where you commit to a heightened tone, which can be funny and dangerous and surprising all at once. And it's an interesting challenge, because I think my natural instinct is to try and make things natural, and that can cause problems. And I think part of the problem, not problem, but one of the challenges with She Rides Shotgun, having me as a director for that, is I naturally am attracted to naturalism, but that pushes me away from the pulpy, sort of the Tarantino-y, true romancy sort of fairy tale version of a kid on the run with her dad. And suddenly my version feels a bit more raw, and you're suddenly more aware that a kid is going through quite a tough thing. So sort of naturally, that's partly why I felt like I needed to change the ending of the movie to sort of reflect the journey this character's been on. I'm still learning about myself and the type of stories I'm trying to tell, and trying to, I'd love to do a love story. That's, it's like, I feel like a lot of my work has been known for like marrying like tenderness and sort of sensitivity with kind of brutality. But I just feel way more comfortable in the soft and the sensitive. That's where I feel like I naturally want to take things, and I would love to apply my general sensibility to a love story rather than a crime story. So that's something I'd love to do in the future.
That's interesting what you just said there. Just quickly, just to finish this point, that you said that because you've done The Gentleman, and that tone is a tone that you've inherited coming onto the job as a director. Whereas on something when you're doing a feature, it's almost like it's your job to actually set that tone in motion in the opening scenes and the open imagery, to therefore then later on, when there is going to be a joke that's going to be within that boundary of the tone you've created, it kind of like doesn't betray outside of what you've already set. Those opening scenes being so striking, and I guess they must have been so important in laying down that education of tone to the audience.
Yeah, I think, something Ian Seller always, and Brian talked about a lot, is that you sort of, every film teaches you how to watch it in the first few minutes, or is it David Lean that says you state your intentions in the first 10 seconds or something, or you sort of, so I do think that's true. And I don't know, I feel like comedy is not something I've done. I'd love to, but I think, going back to The Departed as a reference, all great films have levity and moments of humor and moments where you let the valve off, and kind of, I like eccentric people. I like things that are unexpected, but at the same time, I quite like classical narratives. Like and maybe it's a criticism of the films that I've done up to now, that it's like, okay, well, we've seen this before, and it's true. I feel I don't naturally want to try and like subvert. I quite like old-fashioned stories. I like well-told movies from the 70s and things like that. And I think there's, it sort of comes down to, I don't really see myself as an intellectual person. It's why I almost quit film school after the first week, because I don't feel intellectual, but I do feel quite a very emotional person, and everything I do is like trying to understand what something feels like, or trying to empathize with what something might feel like to someone going through that, and then communicating that to an audience. That really is as simple. Like, maybe that's what I think directing is for me, is like trying to understand a feeling as best as I can, and then help other people feel it. If I think about it in any grander terms than that, then I sort of freak out and feel like I'm not the right person to be doing it.
I think we'll probably make this our last question of the main agenda. And it's because I've been intrigued to know what work you do outside of film to ground you after having to deal with the stresses of being on set, the many voices that you can experience on set in rooms or by email sometimes. Because I think a lot of people in this industry, they get so lost when making projects or chasing the next one, they don't take the time along the way to refill their cup with any life experience and to put back out there as art. So I'd be intrigued to know what you do to refill your cup or interrogate yourself so that you can go into the next project as a more well-rounded person, I suppose.
I feel that's an interesting question. I definitely
been on
do.
a spiritual journey.
I do feel I'm a very reflective person, and I feel like I'm a bit of a daydreamer, and I do need to reflect on things a lot. So, and I'm probably, I probably drive people mad because I'm not like, I'm not the quickest person at being responsive. Sometimes as a form of, I don't know, recovery or just like preservation, sometimes I'm not the most accessible person, and it's through no other reason other than, as you know, you are in so much demand when you're making something that I think I have a natural instinct to sort of pull the drawbridge up a little bit and sort of hide, and I probably need to get better at being less selfish about that. But for me, yeah, I mean, just really simple things. I love cooking. Like, cooking's a huge passion for me, and just cooking for myself again, and eating well, and reading, and seeing my friends, and being back in part of a community, and being in nature, and all of that stuff is really important to me. I always feel a bit embarrassed to say this. I've never really been a huge cinephile type person. I'm not someone who lives in the cinema. It doesn't feel relaxing to me. It feels like I'm trying to, it's like a very active thing to analyze, learn. It makes me think, it starts giving you idea, it's very, I love it, but I don't find it relaxing. And I don't find watching TV shows relaxing. For me, it would be more like, music and galleries, and I love video games, so I'll definitely be seen playing, catching up on things like that. And I think what's important is you go from huge structure to then suddenly having no structure again. And I think it's important to kind of maintain a sense of structure when you're not on a film set, because the whiplash is, I think it's really easy to sort of feel a bit lost and a bit aimless, and a bit you see other people your age, they're sort of like, I don't know, there's just so much more structure, whereas I've gotten very used to not really knowing where am I going to be in 6 months. I have no idea, and you have to sort of get comfortable with that and enjoy that to an extent. But it drives my family mad, because it's just, if you want to make sure I'm not going to do something, then let's plan to do it in a few months. Because the moment I plan or commit to doing something in 3 or 4 months, then for sure that means I'm going to be somewhere else doing something else for work. So enjoying, cool. I think, in being present, I guess what it comes down to is like, that's more of just a general life thing, but sort of maintaining presence and gratitude.
Great. Can I just ask as a follow-up, what games are you playing at the minute? I'm also a big gamer.
Obviously, I've been traveling a lot because we had we've been promoting the movie, and then I went to do The Gentleman. So I thought it was important for me to invest in a Nintendo Switch 2. So I've been playing Tears of the Kingdom, and I've been playing a lot of Mario Kart, and I've been replaying Cyberpunk. So that's what I've been filling my video game time with.
Cyberpunk bangs. Yeah, great. Did you have a nugget of the week for us, Nick? If you have a tidbit of something that has inspired you this week, it could be a book or a moment, or it could be a film, it could be anything.
I read some poetry by Pablo Neruda. Just really, really wonderful. So that would be, I think that's been inspiring for me this week. And also just awesome. Like I got back to Los Angeles, and the sun I'm finding very, very inspiring right now. Just sort of get out and try and I'm sure. I don't tan too much, but if I can sort of be slightly less ghostly after being stuck inside so much, that'd be great.
The spare thought for us who are fucking dark at 5 p.m. Then grey the rest of the time.
I'm not in a hurry. Yeah, I'm not in a hurry I'm happy to avoid some winters for a while.
Yeah.
Great. On my end, my nugget of the week is simply Dancing in the Ashes. Actually, is to go and watch a short film that's on YouTube on the Bournemouth Film School YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
It is, believe it or not. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because like you can still see you in it, and there's even from the jump, there's some smart stuff you've got going on. And narratively, I remember from watching it years and years and years ago, it was like for work that is done at such an early stage in someone's career, it's got all the hallmarks of someone who's going to go and do interesting work. So I think it's interesting for our audience to go and watch. In any case,
thank you. Yeah. Caveat being very early, very long time ago. I find it hard. I find it hard to watch personally, but I'm very very proud of what it was for its time.
And mine is a Nick Rowland double bill. So I've got in there Slap, which is on Short of the Week. It's the YouTube link to watch it. And I think that this film, like I said at the start of the episode, that filmmakers that are coming up, they watch your work, and I certainly have studied your work. And when Marcus and I were both on House of the Dragon, we used to often talk about your work, just generally.
Thank you.
Fans of your work. So
thank you so much.
Was brilliant. I still remember that film from when I first started wanting to get into film, and I remember watching it, and it was amazing. It was amazing. It was just so. I mean, not to use a really crap overused word, but it was bold at the time to be doing something like that. I think that actually it's even more relevant in this day and age, 2025, for a film like that to be watched.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that, and I think it's something we all do. We're so focused on the next thing. It's like that I sometimes don't. Just haven't thought about my old work for a long time, and sometimes people do. Reach out and say that it's helped or whatever, or that it's sort of stayed with people, and that's obviously an amazing thing to hear, and why we do it. And I think what it comes down to is film. It's about for me, I think film is about emotion. It's about being moved in whatever way, but just I think that's what it's all about. So if someone is moved by a film, then they have felt the thing that you were feeling, and you've had that connection with that person, and that sort of feels quite sacred to me. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time, Nick. And
thank you.
Not just for this, but also in the help that you kind of provided me making Space Plug. Like, couldn't have made it without your help, which you went above and beyond with in terms of coming out on a Saturday to help me in the rehearsal and
it was good fun. It was good fun.
Yeah,
and
I appreciate it.
It's lovely to see you again, and thanks for coming to see the movie the other day as well.
Yeah, no, everyone should go and watch it. She Rides Shotgun probably comes out at the end of November. Should be out by the time this podcast goes live. So yeah, go and shout about it and enjoy. Thank you so much.